Hello, welcome to part 1 of me making my Ciri costume from the upcoming Witcher 4. I'm not going to spend too much time here making a whole introduction because this video is long enough as it is. I've already edited most of it, and it's a doozy. It's a long one. So we're splitting this up into 3 parts. This part today, I'm going to be showing you how I made all of my clothes and everything that I wore. Part 2, I'll show you how I made my armor and swords, and then part 3, we'll finish off all the details and I will show you the final reveal in that video. But today we're starting the clothes. So when I say I love The Witcher, that is definitely an understatement, but I want to clarify, I am talking about the books and the games. The show is not something that will be spoken of here today. That's a whole different topic of discussion that maybe we'll get to at some point. But as soon as I saw the reveal for the 4th game coming out, I knew that I had to turn into Ciri. I had to be her. I want to be her. I can't wait to play as her whenever this game comes out. I am so excited. So that's exactly what we're going to start doing today in this video. As with most projects, I had to start by setting my mannequin to my correct dimensions, and I had to kind of fudge it a little bit and get a little assistance from some other clothing items. We need some reinforcements. Perfect. Don't be weird about it. I'm watching you. Once I was done, I wrapped the entire thing in saran wrap and then did it again, wrapped the entire thing in duct tape so that I had a nice surface that I could draw what I thought my pattern was going to be on. Once I was happy with my pattern on the mannequin, I was able to carefully cut it off, trying to avoid cutting my mannequin, and then I was able to trace it out onto some butcher paper, add some seam allowance, cut out all my pieces, trace it onto my cotton muslin to make a mock-up. With the mock-up all sewn together, it doesn't have a hood yet, but I was able to at least test the chest and back piece to see if I like the shape of it, which I was overall pretty happy, but did have to make some changes. I like the shape of it overall. I feel like something's wrong here. This feels baggy, but I think if it like came all the way like it was supposed to, it might be right. I need to add some more room somewhere. I'll have to figure out where that needs to happen. Okay, this is not straight on my mannequin. I just added it back on here so I could show you what I'm thinking I'm gonna do. So I think this seam right here, I'm just gonna move this over a little bit. I'm not gonna cut all the way up here. I'm gonna keep this top panel as is and make this right here all one panel. So just moving that line over. And then this front panel, I'm gonna add about 1 inch to the top here. This neckline will probably come down a little bit lower since I'm adding stuff here, that's fine. And then at the bottom, I'm gonna add about 3.5 inches to each side. So it'll kind of flare a little bit, but I like that a little bit. Like if you look at the pictures, the bottom of her gambeson type thing kind of does flare out a little bit. So I'm fine if that ends up being a little bit too much. I also think once we have all the padding in there with the quilting and everything like that, I think having a little bit extra room will be beneficial. But we'll see. I'm gonna cut that line, rip this apart here, make some changes, and we'll see how that looks. I didn't film the process of me, making my new pattern pieces and stuff because it really wasn't all that interesting. I just kind of resized some stuff essentially. But I went through and did that. While I did that, I also went through and patterned my hood that I was going to need so I could go ahead and attach that, see how that was going to fit, which making a hood was not as hard as I thought it was going to be, but it was definitely a learning curve and something that I had to know for this project. Now that I know how to do it, I might add a hood to everything because it was so much fun, and
spoiler alert, I've already worn this to Renfest and it rained that day, and so it was really nice having a hood, like a functional hood for it. So I will definitely be trying to add more hoods to things because it was super nice. Once I was happy with my new pattern pieces, I sewed everything back together, attached my hood, and did another test fit. Now, since this is for myself, I only altered one side, and I figured I could just measure to my own midline and make sure everything fit well on that one side, and I was happy. So then it was time just to get started on the real deal. I want to know who's been gatekeeping this, but I did not know until this project that you can iron your papers to keep them from curling up whenever you're trying to trace them onto, whatever fabric you're using. This was incredible, and I will be doing this from now on.
That is so cool. I will be doing this from now on because I'm tired of weighing down my papers on my fabric.
I'll speed this next part up for you so you don't have to sit through it as long as I did, but I traced everything out onto my fashion fabric and cut it all out. This took a lot longer than I thought it was going to because I needed 4 of every pattern piece to make the inner and outer layers on both the left and right side. So this took about 2 or 3 hours total.
I'm nearing the end of cutting all these pieces out, and I am really having to finagle how these pieces go on here. Like, this is the last bit of my fabric that I have. Like, this little section right here is all the leftover I'll have. So I just barely made it. If I didn't have that extra fabric from before for my previous project, I would have not had enough fabric for this. So that was super lucky. I've got 22 pieces of fabric here. That took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. But I got it done for today. I got 4 pieces for each of the main body sections. 2 pieces for the hood. So that is all that I had time for today. It took me about 3 hours to get all this cut out. So I don't have any more time today to actually assemble this. So when you see me next, it'll be a new day and we'll be assembling everything.
The sewing on this was relatively straightforward. It was just sewing along all my seams as you do. So I'm not going to show you the sewing part, but here's all of my pieces laid out on the floor, and I just sewed them all together, inner and outer lining. I didn't attach my hood yet. I'm going to do that after I do all my quilting, but you can see here everything was attached. I went through and trimmed all the edges with my scallop scissors so that it didn't fray as much. And then I went through and just pressed all of my seams, made everything nice and crispy. Next, I needed to figure out how to do the quilting, and this was really difficult but really fun at the same time. I started with the bust area. On the reference pictures and videos, she has like diagonal lines that go across to kind of mimic the main seam across the bust. So I started with those, and then figuring out the vertical seams, I worked starting at my side seam and made those lines parallel going towards the front and the back, just to kind of keep everything square, I guess you would want to say. I did 1-inch lines everywhere, and then whenever I got to the top portion, you can't really tell in the images and stuff like that what's happening up there, so I just kind of made up my own pattern, and I think it turned out great.
I look like crap, but we're not going to talk about that. Running into a little bit of an issue here. I don't think I have enough of my batting to like quilt the entire gambeson piece. So what I've decided to do, I think I'm just going to quilt the front panels with actual batting, and on the back panel I'm just going to add my quilting lines but not actually add batting to it. It's not ideal, but I think it'll look fine, mostly because I'm gonna have, my hood covers part of the back, then I'm gonna have my swords on my back, I'll have a corset thing like around part of it, so you're not really gonna see too much of the back anyways. So I think it'll turn out fine. Like this is all that I have, which I know looks like a lot right now, but whenever I add my pieces to it, and then have to cut off the excess and whatever. I don't think I have enough space on here to put all of my panels on here. So we'll see. Maybe it'll work out perfectly and I will be able to pad the whole thing, but as of right now, I don't think that that's gonna work.
To attach my batting, I just went through and added some pins right along this center seam at the bust because I was going to start there. The way I like to do batting, I leave a little bit extra room around the sides because batting likes to shift and whatever as you're sewing it, so I leave a lot of extra around the edge of my patterns, but I only pin down the center section because I start at the center. That's exactly what you see me doing here. I started at the center seam, just traced over my lines there, and then I was able to start working on my vertical lines. For those, I was able to just start on one side and work top to bottom. I made sure to sew in one direction, so on all of them I started at the top, ended at the bottom. That way if there was any shifting at this point vertically, it would all happen in the same direction.
Please excuse the mess. All the quilting and stuff that you saw, that was all earlier today. It is now 8 o'clock at night and I've convinced myself that I can probably finish most of this tonight. We'll see. I need to press all of my seams on the back pieces and then add my quilting lines onto one. I did end up running out of the batting, so I'm not gonna be able to actually pad it, but just the quilting lines, I think it'll give it enough illusion of being padded because the batting's not super thick on the front. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but it makes sense to me and I think it'll be fine. So need to press the seams, get the quilting lines done. I think I can assemble everything tonight, get the hood attached, and then all we have left to do is attach the fur binding. I haven't decided if I'm gonna actually stitch that on or if I'm just gonna like fabric glue it on. Fabric glue kind of seemed like the easier option, so I'm thinking we're gonna go with that, but we'll see whenever we get there. So join me for a little bit of chaos sewing to see if I can actually get this done by a reasonable hour tonight. I feel like I'm making pretty good time. I got all the quilting lines done on this back panel. It puckered up quite a bit. I'm not really sure what made that happen. Normally I wouldn't like that, but it kind of gives the same like puffy quilted illusion as the front panel, so I'm not super mad at it. So overall, and I think once I actually have it on, I don't think it'll be this aggressively bumpy, but we are making good progress so far. So next thing to do, assemble all of my pieces and then attach everything together. Let's go.
To attach my inner and outer layers together, I pinned and sewed everything except for my shoulder seams and the very bottom. That way I had a way to flip it right side out. And after that point, I started having so many issues with my sewing machine and honestly had a little bit of a crash out, but you know, we eventually got there and it was totally fine.
I've rethreaded this so many times. The thread keeps breaking. I don't know why, but I'm about to just throw this at the wall. Let's try a new needle. Maybe that's the problem. What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Does this thread just suck? What the actual... I'm gonna lose it. This machine I know can go through super thick stuff. I've sewed leather with this machine before. I've used this thread, so I know it's not, I know it's not bad thread. I've used this before and I've never had this issue, so I don't know what's happening right now. I just changed my needle. Maybe the tension, I don't know.
Eventually I decided that maybe it was just the thread that just sucks. and wasn't working well with my machine, so I just resorted to hand sewing on the hood, which worked out totally fine since this was one of the last things I had to actually sew on this whole thing.
I've had multiple crash outs, mostly because of my sewing machine just malfunctioning. I think I'm gonna have to take the entire thing apart to figure out what's going on with it. But I'm finally at a good stopping point. As you saw, I got the hood attached and everything. I need to finish off the edge here at the bottom, but I need to figure out what's going on with my sewing machine before I try to do that. I made these little hooks that are gonna go on the front. You can see made these little hooks. That was really easy. I just cut out the shape of what I wanted, interfaced it, and then sewed another of the same piece on it and flipped it inside out. They are gonna go, they're gonna go about here-ish, and then that other strap will go on the opposite side to obviously close it off like a belt. I'm gonna wait to attach these until I get to where I'm adding the rivets to my pants. You'll see that in a little while. That way I can just do all the rivets at once, but essentially on this little side where these little bumpy pieces are, there's gonna be 4 rivets that attach it to the gambeson. I'm at a good stopping point for tonight. I need rest. I am very tired. Tomorrow we will hopefully be finishing off the edge of that. I will hopefully be starting adding the fur around the hood and everything. That would be lovely, but we'll see.
I came back the next day after some much needed rest and felt much better about this whole project. So I flipped everything back to inside out and pinned all along my bottom edge, making sure all of my seams were lined up, and then I was able to go through, stitch everything together. I left a little gap in the middle so that I could flip everything back to the correct right side out direction. After all this, then I went through, once everything was flipped to be the correct way, went through and top stitched the bottom just to keep everything, give everything a nice clean edge on there. Now all I had to do left on this gambeson was add the fur, add my little buckle closures, and then I was done with this portion, but we'll get to that later.
Here's my game plan. So these were my pants from my previous Ciri cosplay that I had done. I think my plan is going to be to paint the right leg completely black, paint down this leg. You can see these holes a little bit in here where I removed the previous rivets that I had had. They look aggressively deep whenever the pants are not on, but I did try the pants on and you can't really see the holes. So what I'm gonna do is on this leg, in the picture she has kind of like a brown panel on this side. So I think I'm gonna bring the black paint all the way up to this edge of holes over here just to help hide those even more. So I'm gonna go all the way down. I probably won't paint down the entire leg just to save on paint because I'll have taller boots that'll cover the majority of the bottom leg anyways. On the back, these pants, it's kind of weird, but they have this like seam along the butt. So I think on the leg that is solidly black, I'm gonna paint all the way up to that seam and just leave the top part brown. And then on the leg that has the brown panel, I haven't decided yet if I'm gonna paint the bottom part of this leg black also, or if I'm just gonna leave the entire back of this leg brown. So I don't know what I've decided yet, but you'll see whenever I'm done here.
I had never used leather paints or anything like that, or really painted on any kind of fabric for that matter, so I wanted to be a little bit overly prepared here. So I went through, mapped out the areas that I was going to paint with painter's tape, and then everything that I was reading recommended prepping the surface with a rubbing alcohol, or, if you have like an actual prep solution for leather, that works too, but rubbing alcohol worked just fine. So I went through just to remove any oils or anything like that from the surface, and then went in with my paint and started painting all of my black areas. Honestly, after one coat, it looked great. I did end up adding a second one just to remove a little bit of brush strokes, but overall, it looked great. And then I did the exact same thing on the back of the pants. There is a sealer that needed to go over all of this, but I was going to wait until after I finished painting my boots so that I could just seal everything all together at the same time.
I am 99% certain I had these boots in high school, and I just got them today from Goodwill for like $9, I think. So I like the shape of them. I like that they have this little buckle thing. I think that matches the costume pretty well. I'm gonna paint them black because her boots are black in all the reference photos. And I'm just using the same paint that I used on my pants. I'm gonna paint them, let them dry for 24 hours, and then seal them really well.
Overall, painting the boots and the pants took no time at all. Really, the longest part of this was just the drying time because it's recommended to leave the paint to dry for about 24 hours before you seal it, and then leave the sealer for at least 24 hours to let it fully cure. It was dry enough after like a couple hours that I was able to go in and add my second coats, but I did give it that full 24 hours in between each layer, between the paint and the sealer, to allow it to properly cure and dry. For painting the sealer on, I had a little bit of questionable engineering to get these pants hung up, but it worked out fine. So that's all you see me doing here. It looked a little scary at first. I thought it was going to turn out kind of bluish colored, but it eventually dried down perfectly clear and looked great overall. Coming back to my gambeson for a second, I did end up deciding to glue down the fur because I was starting to run short on my timeline here, so gluing everything seemed a little bit faster than sewing it. As you can see here, I was having a little bit of trouble, and turns out I just forgot to take off the inner seal, so that was really smart on my point. Once we got it working though, I was able to glue everything down. I did end up adding more glue than what you can see here. I had to come back and just touch up some areas, but essentially all I did, add some glue, stick down the fur, and then came through with pins to pin everything in place. It was, since everything was kind of curved seams, it was hard to find something that could weigh it down while it dried, so I opted for just pinning everything after the glue was put in place. And it ended up working out perfectly fine, aside from having to go back and touch up a few areas, but in the end, it turned out really nice. Going back over to the pants, it was time to start installing all the rivets. So using the holes that I had from the previous time I wore these pants, I went through and just mapped out a grid of where I wanted all of the new rivets to go. So I went through with a little X-Acto blade, cut a small hole so that I could go through and just poke a rivet through. Now I did try to hammer a lot of the rivets on, but I was not the best at it, and so I kept getting them crooked and they kept breaking, so eventually I decided to just snap them on, and they held up quite well actually.
I really hope it cools off by the time I actually have to wear these, because even with just my arm in here, I am sweating so much. I originally wanted to reuse these, which were from my original Ciri pants, but they are much larger than those, as you can maybe tell. And I think I actually end up liking these small ones better. So that works out in my favor.
Eventually, if I get a rivet press, I'll come back and install these properly, but they're low profile enough that I'm happy with it. I've already worn these and they held up well, so I'm not mad at it. I think they look great. All I had to do now was clean off the chalk lines and we were ready to move on to the next step. Coming back to my gambeson, I was installing these straps now, again with the rivets. These I ended up using my larger rivets that I showed a second ago. Basically all I did here was I laid out my straps where I wanted them, traced around them with some chalk just so I knew where to lay them back down at. Then I went through and cut 3 little holes on each of the ends where my rivets were going to go through. After I did that, I popped a rivet through, marked the back of the rivet with chalk, and laid it down so that it would mark where my hole should go in my gambeson, so that I knew where I needed to poke the rivet through so that it would all line up nicely. I hope that makes sense. I don't know, this is hard to explain, but you can see what I'm doing here.
gonna repeat this on the other side and then we will be done, I think, with everything.
With all the rivets done, it was now time to remove any final pins or chalk lines and do a little try on of everything that I had made so far.
Can't see.
If you made it all the way to the end here, I appreciate you being here with me. I had such a fun time working on this entire project, and I can't wait to show you part 2, hopefully very, very soon. Bye for now.